So thank you all. If there are any questions related to our prayer books that we've talked about, please feel free to ask. I'm more confused now. Was there anything to make more clear?
Prayer book we're using now.
Mhm.
Does all the Episcopal churches in the United States use that prayer book, or are there different versions?
Yeah, so the Book of Common Prayer is what all Episcopal churches use. That is official. The Anglican service is not an official Episcopal text. I'll be talking about some of that more later. The claim is there's a rubric in the prayer book that allows for any rite to be used in traditional language. And the idea was to put that all in one book. It went a little bit beyond that though, and adding a bunch of different optional stuff that's not in the prayer book. So it's never been officially made a liturgical resource for the church. But yes, the Book of Common Prayer, that's what is used throughout. Although again, there are other resources out there that some other churches use. All of those have to be used with permission from the bishop. Yeah.
How long, I mean, I remember when this church was Book of Common Prayer. And I remember being on vestry when the synod, where did the synod start? In Texas or right here in Pennsylvania? Because the Book of Common Prayer, the Anglican prayer book was written by here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And that church doesn't even use it. So, you know.
The congregation left.
What?
The original congregation, when that book was written, left the church.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, I don't remember the changeover. It happened without the church really knowing what was going on. The vestry, because they were at odds with the bishop at that time, they did not want to send money to him or do anything. So what they did was they went to synod. And we all of a sudden, the Anglican prayer book ended up in the pews. And it just went from there. But it had been, Book of Common Prayer was always used in this church.
Yeah, I can't speak to all the history for that, for what happened here. I can say that when we're talking about synod in this class, that's not the same synod. So that's Church of England. So that's not here. I know a lot of church there. I know there's a lot of churches that don't have the best of relationship with the Episcopal Church that use the Anglican service book. It was actually from one of my friends that studied in Austin, Texas, that I learned a lot more about the book itself. It was published up until 2018 by Rosemont. That is correct, they don't use it anymore. It's also correct that there was a lot of the congregation that left with that particular rector who led them to use that, and I guess connected with these other churches. My understanding with him is he's no longer, he's not an Episcopalian, he's not, I think he was a bishop in the Anglican Church of North America. I'd say neither Anglican nor North America discuss, but yeah, they're kind of they're a breakaway from the Episcopal Church. So he was with them for a while, and last I've read, he's a layperson in the Roman Catholic Church. So that's the extent I can really speak to that particular history with it, though.
There was a lot of controversy back then. You had St. James the Less in Pennsylvania, Italy, and there was a whole series of lawsuits because that the Pope established a group, special group for disaffected Episcopalians. And St. James the Less, Father Owsley, who was the priest there, they left the Episcopal Church and ultimately joined the Roman Catholic Church. And in this special group of, what they call it. But anyway, Father Owsley became a Roman Catholic priest, but he leads these sort of Episcopal services. And I think a lot of the people from Rosemont left at the same time. The fellow you're talking about from Rosemont, I don't know why, but he didn't or wasn't allowed to become a Roman priest. So
Yeah.
he's a lay person.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I guess they still worship someplace in a Roman church, off hours or something.
Yeah, again, a lot of that goes to beyond my expertise for the history. What I can say on that is there I believe under the last Pope Benedict, there was an allowance for Episcopal clergy to join the Roman Catholic Church and to be priest in the Roman Catholic Church and keep their wives, which was a big thing. There was some dispensation, and I do think some of them use something that's more like the Book of Common Prayer for worship. There was a lot of controversy around that. I didn't understand the choice, and this is the nice thing about he's not my bishop, so I can say what I want with him. I really didn't understand the choice. Like these are priests that were dissenters and were not listening to their bishops already. Why would you have somebody like that? Like, why would you want them to come and then be clergy in your denomination? Like, it's beyond me. But that's beyond my pay grade. So
We talked about the Methodists last
Mhm.
week, that they broke away sometime in the 1800s.
yeah.
Why they broke away?
So Methodism is a really interesting thing, and the official, well, you'll see this on the side of churches. I don't know if this is still the official name, but Episcopal was in there for Methodists for some time. Methodism is so interesting because I think there's a lot of us that have a great fondness of the Wesley brothers in the Episcopal Church, and then hopefully in Anglicanism beyond our part of the Anglican Communion. But what happened with them? And I said that I have a great love for them. I don't always agree with there's this big theological point that John Wesley said that he believed that perfectionism could be obtained in this life. And he claimed to have known somebody that so this is the thing, this wasn't him saying anything about himself. He was very specific. I have not done this, but I know someone who has. Never said who.
C.S. Lewis.
Well, who
Mere
wouldn't have been?
Christianity talks about how-
I don't think it would have been. Yeah, that would have been way after. It's a nice idea. I think the proof is kind of against that.
Yeah.
For what we see with humanity, but it's a nice idea. But the real reason for the separation is more of a less theological, more technical. So for their work, particularly in the States, John Wesley at least was ordaining people to do that. So ordaining presbyters, only bishops can do that. So that was the reason for the split. Was really because he did something not supposed to do,
Right.
that you can't do, and Church of England and here in the Episcopal Church too. The really interesting thing too, though, is that Methodism is developed very differently in England than it has here, because here there are Methodist bishops, and they're invited to like our General Convention. They'll be invited there. So there have been ecumenical talks with the Methodist Church and with the Episcopal Church for quite some time now. And as somebody, my mother's godchildren are Methodist, so as somebody with that connection, I'm hoping that some fruit comes from that, and hopefully soon.
There's a church in Princeton that's a Methodist church.
Mhm.
And in stone over one of the doorways, Episcopal Methodist.
Yeah.
When I first went to
Yeah.
that church, I was sort of surprised that it was.
Yeah,
this-
yeah. No, because I mean, it wasn't a move away from out of hatred or anything of Church of England. I mean, they were still a Church of England priest. But yeah, part of it was just they're trying to do something different and trying to do something. I mean, revival was a huge part of that. But yeah, no, and of course the official title now would be the United Methodist Church. Although recent work is questioning that United part, unfortunately. Yeah, which is really unfortunate. But yeah, no, particularly older. I remember the first church I served at, the Methodist church, was down a block and across the street. And I think they had something on there that said Methodist Episcopal on their stone. too,
Like
so-
the AME, more or less,
Like the what?
American Methodist Episcopal. AME.
So so
Oh,
yeah, so that's a whole different thing too. So yes, so AME stands for African Methodist Episcopal. That was really that's a really unfortunate part of our history, and something that we in the Episcopal Church, we didn't do a good job of that. There was this assumption after the Civil War that former slaves would continue to worship in the churches that they had, but there weren't a lot of concessions that were made. And you may remember from the sermon I did for oh shoot, my brain is drawing a blank. I'm gonna look that up real quick. Absalom Jones, thank you. Yeah, that was a really embarrassing lapse of my brain there. Yeah, Absalom Jones, who was from this diocese, was one of the few that really stayed, and because concessions were allowed for him to have his own congregation, for him to be a priest. But he was also a big figure for the African Methodist Episcopal, because basically, okay, you're not allowing us to have leadership. You're not allowing us to, have equal status as worshipers. Yeah, like a bunch of former slaves left and formed the AME Church. So, and that's partly why Sunday is still the most segregated day of the week, because of how that happened with worship, which is really a big tragedy, and really unfortunate thing we have to live with. But yeah, that was the origin of the AME Church, was that people thought, oh, the former slaves are going to continue going where they were, and they said, no, peace out. Don't let the door hit you on the as we leave, all that. So, yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I'll stick around if there are other questions on other topics too, but I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording there.